Welcome, fellow bookworms, to Tibra's Den. My name is Whitney, and I am going to be doing the Philosophy of Reading tag. This was created by Brandon's Bookshelf. I will leave their channel linked down in the description below, so definitely check them out. I was tagged in it by Serene Sloth. I really enjoyed her video. I enjoyed her answers. So again, I'll leave her channel also linked down in the description below. Definitely check out both channels and give them some love. And also, before we get started, I just want to remind everybody I will be doing the Festive Readathon, which is by Steph Loves. I'll also leave her channel link down below, but that's going to be going on from the 6th through the 12th. I've already done my picks. That video is already out, and then I'll be doing an update after I read all those for the readathon. If you want to participate, go to Steph Love's channel and get more information on that. But I am really excited for that. I'm also doing 25 days of Bookmas, so I kind of created my own homemade advent calendar book tree. That video won't come out until the end of the month, so if you want to follow along and see what books I get each day, definitely check out my channel on TikTok. Same name, Tibra's Den, and then I also have Instagram where I will be posting every day as I open up each book. So really excited for that. I can't wait to see what they picked out for me, and I hope you will follow along as I do that. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into the questions. There's 20 of them, and there's some great questions in here. So first up is, what's most important, a good character, plot, or message? So I really think it depends. I think for me, I'm very character driven. I like characters I can really connect to and that have a lot of depth. But if it has a strong plot line, I can kind of forgive a weak character base. And on the opposite hand, if they have a strong character base, I can kind of forgive a weak plot line. But for me, I would say I'm more character driven, but I also think a good plot line is very important, and double points obviously if a book has both. Message for me is not as important. I think it can be depending on the type of book, but sometimes books don't need to have a strong message. That's not the point of the book. The book is just supposed to be just kind of an enjoyable read. A good example of that is I recently read Dead Man Docking for my ABC author challenge book. That was my D author, and there was no like strong message to it. It was just supposed to be kind of a light, over the top funny read. And so I think that's kind of dependent on the book as far as whether there's a strong message or not. So I don't think that one's near as important as the other two. So number 2, should one read books about ideas or opinions they disagree with? And again, I think it just depends on the person. For me, I say yes, though, because I think it opens up conversations in real life on maybe some difficult topics, hot button topics and such. I think it can open up those conversations. And I also think it's a way to kind of broaden your mind and your own viewpoints, and solidify maybe your own beliefs, or open up your eyes to maybe the other side and why somebody views things a different way than you do. Especially if it has a well-written character, if it's like a fictional book and it has a well-written character and they might have a viewpoint that you don't agree with, it can kind of connect you on a different level. Or like I said, on the other hand, it might solidify your own beliefs. But I do think it's a way to broaden your horizons, and kind of get different views, and not just be, well, this is my view and this is the only way there is. And so yeah, I think it is. And like I said, if you're reading it with a book club or something, it can be a great way to open up conversation for sure. And 3, as tech advances, what do you think will be the role of books? So I'm assuming this kind of means like physical books. I'm not entirely sure. That's kind of how I interpreted the question. I think the role of books in a more general sense, as far as being available electronically or anything like that, I think it opens up the door to people who maybe aren't big like physical readers, and it definitely allows more access for sure. But for me, I think the role of like physical books are going to be more kind of um, like art, like physical art. Now there's digital art, that's amazing, and there's a lot of tech, but it doesn't necessarily replace the 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 physical art that you can still get. And so I think it's going to be more of like a novelty thing. um but I think it's going to be kind of more treasured if you do have like a physical copy, because I do think like tech's going to replace physical books, which we're already seeing that in a big way, that physical books aren't near as common. But I do think they'll still have a role, especially for like tactile reasons and olfactory reasons. Like you can't get that, um, as tech advances. Like you can't get that novelty of that. So I think they'll still play an important role for sure. But and number 4, how important are summaries, review, and art in your book choosing? So I'll start with the last one first. I think art draws you in initially. So I do think there's a certain importance to that. But for myself personally, it's not quite as strong, um, because it does draw me in, but I will do look at the summary of a book and choose. But of course, it does never draws you in. You never read the summary or the reviews. Reviews, I don't hold much stock in, because I think everybody has such different tastes. I think books, it's not like a product review where it's like, does this product work or not? Because books, like, everybody has such different taste. Now, if it like is criticizing the writing or something like that, like grammar and things like that, it can maybe be helpful. But reviews don't play a very important part as far as my choosing a book, because to me, I think everybody's different. Now, I will say on that hand, like if a book is overly hyped and like really, really popular, I kind of shy away from it, because I think they get so hyped up that I'm like I think I'm going to be let down. But that's kind of the role reviews play. But summaries is where I think it really lies for me. When I read The Ring by Danielle Steele for my book of the month, the summary or the synopsis really didn't capture the story. So I only chose that book based on my grandma. If I had just read the summary or the synopsis, I wouldn't have chosen that book at all. And it did not capture the essence of the story. So I think a good summary is important, to kind of give you an idea and capture really what the story is about, and if it's going to be something that you can connect to and be interested in. So, and number 5, should one ever skim or scan a book? And I think, again, it kind of depends. Now, if you are skimming or scanning to get a piece of information, yes. But as far as just that's your kind of reading the book, I don't necessarily think so. I think, just skimming or scanning it, yeah, you might kind of get the overall theme of the story, but you're not going to get those little details that really make up a story. But like I said, if you're doing like maybe like a paper or something and you need just like a little bit of information, then I think it works to kind of skim and scan and find what you need in a book. So, 6, should reading always be enjoyable? And again, I think it depends on kind of the situation. Sometimes reading, if you're trying to learn something or kind of get more information, it's not always enjoyable. Um, Especially like if it's like a historical read or something, like, or read about nonfiction and tragedy that maybe happened to somebody. That's not always enjoyable, but I think it's important to kind of open your eyes to things that happen. But some people just read strictly for enjoyment, and then yeah, it should be enjoyable if that's your whole purpose for reading. It needs to be enjoyable, but I don't think it always should be. I think sometimes, and even with like fiction books and such, I think sometimes it needs to be kind of uncomfortable. Um, a good example of this is another one of my book of the months. I chose VC Andrews, My Sweet Audrina, and it was very well written, but there was such a problem with it as far as like the theme. Um, it really made you uncomfortable and made you, at least me, it made me very angry because it dealt with kind of abuse of a child and um just very toxic behaviors. And so, was that book enjoyable? On one hand, no, but did it stick with me? Absolutely. And I'm very, very glad I read it. So, and number 7, is it important to be well read? And I don't think necessarily, because I think people get their information in different ways. So reading is not for everyone. And some people can't read. And so being well read itself, no, but being what word am I looking for? Like open to learning and knowledge, yes. An example of this is my mom. Like she has a disease, she literally cannot read. Like it gives her a headache to focus on the book and the reading and such. And so she could do like audiobooks and such, but she does, have a wide knowledge base on different things. Um, and so I think, it's important to have that, be open to education and information, but not necessarily be well read, if that makes sense. So, number 8, what is your book buying process? So, that varies. Right now, I'm really big, and I did this before even. I would go to like a thrift store, especially when I was trying to get my Nora Roberts collection built up. I would kind of go through thrift stores and look specifically for that author, or like bookstores. I would go and try to find and see what I didn't have. I've built up her collection now, but generally speaking, I'll just kind of go and look for titles that kind of catch my attention. So I'll just I'm a scanner. I generally don't go for like a specific book except for my Nora Roberts collection, like, and completing it. Like she just had a new book which I still need to get come out, and obviously I know I'm going to go specifically for that book, but generally I just kind of scan and see what catches my attention. Sometimes it's artwork, sometimes it's the title, and then I always look at the synopsis to see if it's something that I would be interested in. But that's kind of my process. And then also right now I'm doing the ABC Author Challenge, and so I'm going to the thrift stores and looking for like the author's last name and the letter it starts with, so that way I can be exposed to new authors and books that I otherwise wouldn't have read before. And so far that's paid off. I'm kind of 4 for 4 as far as enjoyment of the reading, and they're all authors I've never read before or are not familiar with at all. So that's actually going really well. And so yeah, I'm a scanner and just see what catches my attention. And I definitely try to find new authors and new books that I'm not necessarily familiar with. There's only a couple authors where I will, if I see that they have a book out, especially if it's new, I will grab that. So, and what is your reading process? So I actually kind of went through like years long reading slump. When I was a teenager, my process would be, I would just get a book and I would immediately read it, and I always had a book. I'm a big rereader, so I would reread all the time and such too. If I didn't have a new book, handy to read, I would just choose one of my favorites, and I always even if it was like only a couple minutes, I would pick up my book and read a couple pages or whatever. And now it's more kind of scheduled out. That's part of the reason I started this YouTube channel, was because I was in a big slump, and I'm so glad I did. So like my book of the months, I schedule out by chapter sets, and that really works well for me, having a chapter set. And then I kind of organize it. So I read multiple books at once. I have my book of the month, I have my weekly read, and my Throwback Thursday, which I read within a week. And generally, I'll just kind of sit down and, I'll read the chapter sets, or the book of the weekly read, or the Throwback Thursday book. I'll just sit down and read that until it's finished. A person, I need background, so I'll either be watching TV, or I play a game called Dead by Daylight. I think I've mentioned that before, and so I'll read in between like matches and such. I'll sit there and read a couple pages, but generally speaking, I don't just sit and read. Like, I have other things going on, and so I'll read a section, and then I'll kind of tune into the TV or do the game or whatever, and then I'll go back to reading. And I've always kind of done that. My mom used to laugh at me because she's like, "How can you watch TV and read at the same time?" And it's just, I needed that to be able to focus, and then I could kind of take a break and, watch TV or whatever, tune in when I thought I heard something important, and then jump back into the book. But it's very rare I'll just sit there and read. I think the only author I've ever really done that with is Nora Roberts, and maybe Iris Johansson. I'll sit there and read her books too. But generally speaking, I have background noise, and I kind of go back and forth in between the books. So, and number 10, how do you use what you read? Um, so like I said, I kind of use it either to get more information on a subject. So even if it's fictional, I might look up, something based on, like, I read The Mystery of Mrs. Christie, again, an ABC Author Challenge book by Marie Benedict. And I didn't know, like, that was based on some real life events, and the real author Agatha Christie, and I didn't know some of that stuff. So, I used it to get more information on that. Sometimes, I'll use it to kind of talk about a subject, especially now that I do have the YouTube channel and such. I'll talk about a specific subject that might come up, or I use it kind of as a talking point with others, or I just kind of think about and use it to, again, kind of broaden my own horizons and such, and kind of just get more knowledge. So I really use it kind of as a knowledgeable thing, even if it is fiction. There's things you can take from it that apply to the real world. And also, being autistic, I think for me, I use it, it kind of gives me a way to connect and understand people that because I struggle with that day to day, where it's kind of laid out in a book, their motives, and why they're doing what they are and such. It's kind of laid out for you, and so it allows me to understand, and it kind of fulfills that need of, even though I'm not directly interacting with the characters, it kind of feels like you are, and so it kind of fulfills that need as well. So I don't know if I was very clear in that answer or not, but and number 11, if you could download a book to your brain, would you still read? And absolutely. So again, being autistic, like, I don't like audiobooks. I do not like electronically reading. I need that touch and that smell. I need those senses. Like, it really grounds me. So even if I could download a book, I would still be physically reading, because it grounds me. It's not just the story itself or anything like that. It's that smell, and then having something to hold in my hand. I'm very touch based, and so I need something to hold and to touch. And so yeah, even if I could download it, I would have my physical copies, and I would be reading it that way for sure. So 12, What are your views on rereading a book? So I'm a big rereader. Uh, Boo Boo's stretching, but I'm very, very big on rereading. For me, again, I think it kind of goes along with my autism. I think even if you're not autistic, um, some people enjoy rereading, but for me, I struggle, especially if there's a lot of characters in a book. I really struggle, keeping the characters straight. And so it really does help. Like, it can be a book or even a show that I'm very familiar with. And if I'm trying to talk about the character, I'll forget names and things like that. So that's something I struggle with. So the more I reread a book, the more familiar the characters come to me, and the easier it is for me to actually enjoy and process the story itself. And I'll catch things that I didn't catch, first couple times around, because I was trying to keep characters straight and plot lines straight and such. And so I'll catch things that I didn't catch initially. And even like stories I'm very familiar with, I forget details, and so it's kind of fresh each time. It's familiar, but at the same time, I'll forget little details, and so as I'm reading it, there's new things that come up. And I'm like, oh, like, I didn't realize that was coming, or something like that. So I personally really enjoy rereading, and I have my favorites that I'll reread often. But yeah, I'm big on rereading. I think there's something very familiar and comforting about rereading a book for sure. So, and 13, what makes a good book or a book good? And I don't know. I think it depends on the purpose of the book. Like, for some books, what makes it good is the message it has. For other books, it's a great plot line and well written characters. Other books, it's kind of the way it's written. Like, there's something beautiful about the words the author chooses and things like that. But I think what makes a book good is just being able to really dive into the book, and connect with it on a certain level. I think that's what makes a good book. And then 14, what makes a book bad? And I think it's the opposite, like a book that you really struggle to connect with, whether that's connecting to the characters, the plot line, the message, whatever that may be, or a book that doesn't really flow well, so you really can't connect to those things because the flow isn't there. I think that kind of what makes a bad book. Um, but yeah, I mean, it just kind of goes along with what, the opposite of what makes a good book. So 15. How do you feel about not finishing a book? So, I have a really hard time DNFing a book. I've never DNF'd a book on purpose. When I was in my reading slump, I kind of would pick up a book and then months down the line, set it down, planning on picking it up again, and just never reading for months. And then at that point, I kind of decided, well, do I want to restart this book, or do I want to, oh, I got this new Nora Roberts book, let's just jump into that, things like that. So I've never done it on purpose. I think I admire people that can, because I think, it's certainly freeing to be able to say, I'm not enjoying this book, I'm not going to suffer through it anymore. But for me, I always wonder, like, even if it's a poorly written book and I'm really not enjoying it, I always wonder what happens. And so, I could maybe skip ahead and look and see what happens, but I'll kind of push through. So I applaud those that can DNF a book, but I've never actually purposely DNF'd a book myself. So, and 16, should the author's personal life matter at all? And overall, I would say no, but it does depend. So, like, um, if an author is just stating their opinion and they kind of get backlash for it, I don't necessarily agree with that. Now, if an author, like, is like, let's take J.K. Rowling for instance. I think Serene Sloth you mentioned her too on this question. She, has her opinion, and do I agree with it? Absolutely not. But at the same time, that's her opinion, and I think it would be no different, being like, oh, cancel Harry Potter or whatever. I think that would be no different than if you had a writer who was trans and people were like, well, they're trans, so I'm not going to read that book and I'm not going to support them. Why I think her opinion is not okay. She's not going out and like saying, well, trans people can't read this book or anything like that. Um, and I also think, as far as I know, I never really got too in depth into that. Or if she was going out and actively spreading hate and being cruel, then I would say, boo boo. Then I would say, definitely don't support that author. But for an author just to state their opinion, whether their opinion's right or wrong, I don't think that should necessarily matter, or, things that go on in their personal life should necessarily matter unless they are being outright cruel or something like that. That's kind of where my opinion is. But in 17, if you could only read one genre for the rest of time, what would it be? Um, I would have to say probably fantasy. Those are probably the books I enjoy the most, but I really like family based like books that have a strong like family center to it. Um, and that doesn't necessarily have to be like fantasy or drama or mystery or anything like that. But I say if I had to pick, it'd probably be fantasy. But sometimes I'm not really in the mood for fantasy either, so that's kind of a hard one for me because it kind of just depends on my mood and such. But that would probably be my go to, I would guess. So. And 18, do you ever read a book without knowing anything about it? And I do. I mean, generally I'll read like the synopsis if I'm getting a book, but sometimes I'll get books gifted to me and I'll read them without really knowing anything about it. And I don't really like look at reviews or such before I read a book. Like I said, if a book is kind of being hyped up and such, I kind of shy away from that book. So I will read, books without knowing anything about it at all. Especially like if it's by an author. I enjoy like Irish Johansson's books. There were so many of her books I just picked up and read, not having a clue what they were about. And so yeah, I would do that. So, and I do that. Number 19, what author, genre, series, or culture can you just not get into and why? And for me, author wise, it has been Stephen King. That's my sister's favorite author. She absolutely loves Stephen King, and I've tried to read him multiple times, and I just really, really struggle with his books. I think the only one when I was younger that I got through was Salem's Lot. I really love like vampires and such. So that was the only one that I actually got through when I was younger. Everything else I tried, I guess I did kind of DNF those. I don't know that it was necessarily on purpose. It's just I couldn't get into it. Um, so I just never was drawn to pick it back up, I guess, where I didn't purposely think, well, I'm not going to read this book anymore. I don't know. Anyway, so Stephen King for sure. Genre wise, there's not really much. I'm not as big into like graphic novels and such, but yeah, there's not really much genre wise. I'll pretty much try. I do struggle with sci-fi somewhat, just because there's so much going on in sci-fi and so many like new things to keep straight that I do struggle with that. But I would say for that question, the standout is Stephen King books for sure because he jumps around too much, and I have a really hard time following the storyline and the characters. So, and let's see, last question, number 20. Do you think everyone should read and why? And I don't. Do I think everyone should seek knowledge or enjoy stories? Yes. But again, it kind of goes back to my mom. Like, she physically can't read, so she might get a story from a movie or a TV show. And a lot of, books have been adapted into movies and TV shows, so she's still getting that story and that information and such, but she's not reading. And so, yeah, I think no. But I do think stories are important, and everybody should seek to, enjoy stories, whether that's fiction, nonfiction, or not, or get information and such. But I think some people physically can't read, and that's okay. So that's kind of my answer for that one. Let me know your thoughts down below. I don't really know anybody. Um, I'm still relatively new to the booktube community. I might leave a couple of people linked in the description below. Serene Sloth obviously already did this, but Reading with Kim is another kind of newer booktuber that we've been supporting each other, so I'll probably uh, tag her and I'll link her channel down below. And if I think of anybody else, I'll leave their channel down below as well. But I really did enjoy this book tag, so thank you to Brandon's Bookshelf for creating it, and thank you for Serene Sloth for tagging me in it. And I'm going to leave you here. I know this was a little bit longer, but yeah, happy reading, everyone. Bye.